I want to thank everybody for tuning in to today's show. I have an incredible guest, someone that I have wanted to personally meet for several years now and share his wisdom with you. And so he's agreed to come on. Larry Elder, thank you so much for being on the show today.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So I think a lot of people know who you are. You ran for president, and but I'm just going to give a little bit of background. You're a prominent conservative radio show host. You've authored multiple books. You have a law degree, and you ran for president of the United States. I've been a fan of yours since about a year before the COVID crazy lockdowns, and I learned about you from Dennis Prager, and I'm so glad that I did because I've just enjoyed all the information that you have shared, and so thank you again for coming on.
My pleasure.
So we just had the third GOP debate in Miami. Vivek Ramaswamy seemed to really agitate a lot of people. I personally like him. I like that he agitates people. But he talked about how Republicans aren't working together, and this is why they continue to lose. He then boldly turned the tables on the mainstream media and said that you and you and you are responsible for hurting the country. You promoted this Russia collusion hoax for years, and you could see the hosts, the moderators looked like deer caught in the headlights.
Right.
Who do you think? What were your thoughts on his approach, that bold style? And then who do you think did well in the debate, and who do you think will be dropping out soon?
Well, again, thank you so much for having me. I want to add one more thing to my resume, and that
Okay.
is I also ran for governor of California in 2021
Oh,
in the
yes.
recall election, getting 3.5 million votes, more than virtually all of the other replacement candidates. There were 46 people who tried to replace Gavin Newsom, and I got virtually more votes than all the other ones combined. So I just wanted to add that little wrinkle. Now,
If I had lived in California, I would have voted for you because I
I
watched
think a lot of
Gavin
people,
Newsom.
yeah,
Yeah, we'll talk
I think a
about
lot of
him.
people have buyer's remorse now because of that. And we're going to get to this, of course, but I wrote a book about my campaign for governor. The At the time, thought that I might run for president. I hadn't decided yet when I wrote the book. A little bit about my background and what's gone wrong with California, a one-party state, and what somebody like Gavin Newsom would do if he, God forbid, were to become president of the United States. But I was at the debate. I actually attended that. I was in the attendance. I should have been on the debate stage. When I ran, the first debate requires you to have 3%, pardon me, 1% or more in 3 different polls, plus 40,000 individual donors. And I got 40,000 individual donors. I submitted 3 polls where I was at 1% or better. At the last minute, Ronna McDaniel, the chairwoman, calls me, the one that got lambasted by Vivek, calls me and says, Larry, I'm sorry, you're not qualified for the first debate because one of the polls you submitted cannot be used. I said, which poll? She said, Rasmussen. I said, the one that was the most accurate in 2016, the one that you guys quote all the time? She said, yes. The rules stipulate that any poll that's affiliated with any of the campaigns, and Rasmussen is affiliated with Trump, cannot be used by that candidate or any of the other candidates. After that, Rasmussen puts out a statement, Stephen, and says, we're not affiliated with Trump. There's no reason why Larry Elder can't use us as one of his polls. And so I gave the RNC until 2 o'clock the day of that first debate to change their mind. Otherwise, I was going to file a complaint with the Federal Elections Commission. Tick, 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 2 o'clock came and went. They didn't change their mind. And so now we filed a complaint. My lawyer is a former chair of the Federal Elections Commission, and he argues that by failing to apply the debate criteria fairly to all the candidates, including Larry Elder, what they essentially did was to give an in-kind contribution to the 8 people who qualified. And if you value the time that they would have had to pay for the 2 hours, that's a $100 million fine. So they're facing a possible $100 million fine by not putting up Larry Elder. It's going to take years for the FEC to adjudicate the complaint, but it's now in the water. Now, as for what happened on the debate night, the last one, as I said, I was there, and Vivek shot out of the cannon right away, and as you know, took down Ronna McDaniel, accused her of governing over a series of losses. And it is true, we lost in 2018, in 2020, in 2022, and just the other night in Kentucky, Mississippi, and we lost the one of the houses of representatives in Virginia. And we have not been able to figure out how to navigate the issue of abortion, which seems to be animating the other side. So I thought it was a fair comment about Ronna McDaniel. And since she's the one that prevented me from making the debate stage in the first place, there's no love lost between Larry Elder and Ronna McDaniel. She won't be getting a Christmas card from me. As far as him taking on the media are concerned, I thought it was very well done, although I must say he did not go far enough in the case of NBC. Recognize this. NBC is the network that has given a show to Reverend Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton became famous by falsely accusing a white man of raping Tawana Brawley, has never apologized for that. Al Sharpton was in the thick of what was called the 1991 Crown Heights riots, where a bunch of Black people attacked Jews. And Al Sharpton is on tape saying, if the Jews want to get it on and come over to my house, let them do so. He referred to Jews as diamond merchants and white interlopers. He has had a series of anti-Semitic slurs over the years. He is on a videotape, I kid you not, you go on YouTube and look at it, where he is agreeing to sell and deal cocaine to an undercover FBI agent. All that's on tape. And here this guy is having a show on MSNBC, an NBC property, and is referred to frequently as a Democrat kingmaker. That would be the equivalent of Fox News giving a show to David Duke. It is outrageous that NBC has hired this man. It is outrageous that he gets away with it. So as far as I'm concerned, Vivek should have used that as the number one reason why NBC is morally bankrupt and should not be hosting the debate. In general, though, you know, the media, of course, did this Russia collusion for 2.5 years. The Hunter Biden laptop story, the 51 former intelligence agents that wrote that letter claiming that it had all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. The media ran with that. There was a study done that looked at 6 or 7 swing states, and it found out that about 15% or so of the Biden voters in those swing states would not have voted for Biden had they thought the Hunter Biden laptop story was real. So that was an example of election interference. And then you have Hillary running around for 4 years, referring to Donald Trump as illegitimate, going on programs like NBC, like CNN, saying the election was stolen. She actually used the S word. A former president of the United States, Jimmy Carter, said that he believes the Russians put Donald Trump in there. Jay Johnson, Obama's DHS secretary, testified under oath about 2016 and said that the Russians tried, but they failed to change, this is very important, a single vote tally, not one, although they tried to do it. A poll found that 66% of Democrats believe the Russians, quote, change vote tallies, close quote, to elect Donald Trump. When again, the DHS secretary under Obama testified under oath, not a single vote tally was changed. Also, he testified, I have no idea whether or not the Russian interference, and there was interference, altered the outcome of election, affected public opinion. There was a big study done by NYU, and they found that the effect of what the Russians did, basically buying a bunch of Facebook ads, had a barely measurable effect. The reason this is important is that 78% of Democrats, according to a Gallup poll, very respected, believe that the Russian interference, quote, altered the outcome of the election. It's my long way of saying that a greater percentage of Democrats believe 2016 was stolen than we feel that way about 2020, but nobody calls them election deniers. Their lawyers were not sued, and their lawyers were not facing disbarment. The double standard is absolutely outrageous. And the media ran with it, still runs with it. And I was very, very happy that Vivek Ramaswamy took them down out of the gate. I did not feel, however, that his attacks against Nikki Haley were legitimate. I don't understand why there's bad blood. And the bottom line is this: as much as it was entertaining to be there and to watch him do all of this stuff, if I'm a Donald Trump voter in the primaries or in the caucuses, my question is, did anything happen that night that alters my opinion about voting for Donald Trump? And the answer is no. Donald Trump is ahead by some 50 points. I think the next highest person might have 6 or 7%, if that. And I'm not sure that Vivek Ramaswamy moved the ball in his favor. I don't think anything's going to change as a result of that debate. The bottom line is Donald Trump did a great job as president. great job on borders, great job on the economy, great job on energy independence, great job on gasoline prices. Inflation was negligible, and now we have all of these problems. And had it not been for Joe Biden pulling out of the way he did from Afghanistan, leaving around $7 billion of military equipment, flat-footing our allies by not telling them, leaving hundreds of Americans and Afghan collaborators, and then the nerve to say that not a single general advised him not to do it, when in fact 2 of them testified under oath. We told the commander-in-chief that the Taliban would come back and the Afghan government would collapse within a matter of days, if not weeks. And he publicly said he never got any advice. So if I am an ally of America or an enemy of America, either American military intelligence is incompetent or the commander-in-chief ignored competent military intelligence. Either way, not a good look. I don't believe that you and I would be having this conversation about Ukraine or about Hamas in Israel if Donald Trump had been reelected. So we have all these problems, and the person that I thought would be a brilliant steward of the economy and an excellent commander-in-chief is a guy that was not in that debate, on that debate stage in Miami. So the real winner of that debate was Donald Trump.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I tend to trust the military people more than Joe Biden. So I'm going to go ahead and say he ignored competent advice. You said something about the Hunter Biden laptop story, people not knowing and now having buyer's remorse. I've been looking at the polling data for my show. It does seem many of those swing states are coming back pretty strong for Donald Trump. Those people now know, not only do they know that that information was withheld from them, they know that they were lied to, on top of feeling the hurt in their own wallets. For these 3 reasons, do you see those being top reasons why the pendulum is swinging back towards Trump in the swing states?
I agree with you that the pendulum is swinging back towards Trump. And I don't believe that the Hunter Biden laptop story or the recognition now that it's a legitimate story has a whole lot to do with it. I think it's borders. I think it's crime. I think it's inflation. I think it's gasoline prices. And I think people are now beginning to calm down a little bit about Donald Trump, beginning to accept his personality, his idiosyncrasies for what they are, and are now looking at what I say where the ball lands. When I have friends who don't like Donald Trump, and I hear their criticism, primarily it's because of Donald Trump's style. And I tell them this: I'm not a golfer, but I love the sport. And I was watching the Golf Channel once, and a interviewer was interviewing these 2 very experienced professional golfers and asked them both what makes a good golfer. And the first golfer went through this beautiful, long, elegant description of what makes a good golfer mechanically, where he puts his hands, how he swings, where his hips go, how he keeps his eye on the ball. And the other one said, I look to see where the ball lands. Yeah. So don't pay attention to Donald Trump's swing. Look where the ball lands. Did it land properly on immigration? Yes. On borders? Yes. The most secure border arguably we've ever had. Betsy DeVos, his Secretary of Education, supports school choice. Why is that so important? In the inner city, K through 12, let me just pick 2 cities. Baltimore, 13 public high schools in Baltimore, I kid you not, all located in the inner city. 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. Chicago, 53 government schools, all located in the inner city. 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. Yet school choice programs, the ones that really are independent from the teachers union and from the regulations, have proven to be very successful. But the Democratic Party is opposed to school choice because one of their largest funder, if not their largest funder, is the teachers union. So did Donald Trump's Secretary of Education advocate for school choice? Absolutely. And then, of course, the economy, gas prices, and he kept us out of these wars. So those are the reasons I believe the swing states are now coming back to Donald Trump. And there's one other factor, and that is the Black vote, Hispanic vote. Remember, Ron DeSantis carried Dade County when he won his reelection by 20 points. First time I think that's ever happened where a Republican has done that. And if you look at the polls, the Black support for Joe Biden is eroding rapidly. Donald Trump got 8% of the Black vote in 2016. He got 12% in 2020, a 50% increase, and 20% of Black men voted for him. I think the numbers are even higher right now because Blacks are looking at crime, they're looking at inflation, they're looking at gas prices, and they're looking at the borders. And for those reasons, I believe that A large percentage of Black people are going to vote Republican for the very first time. And the Democrats know this, and they are scared to death.
Yeah. Wow. That's really concerning about the math statistic. We're going to get into that a little bit deeper, but on a different show that I listened with you, you said that you ran for president, and if I have this wrong, correct me, but this is what I remember. You ran for president for two main reasons. Number one, to win, and then number two, to bring certain issues to the forefront of the American mind. What were those issues that you wanted America to hear?
The first issue is what I call the epidemic of fatherlessness. And nobody but nobody was talking about that until I got into the race. 70% of Black kids enter the world without a father in the home married to the mother, up from 25% back in 1965. In fact, 25% of white kids now enter the world without a father in the home married to the mother. 50% of Hispanic kids do. 40% of all American kids do, up substantially from 1965. Why is 65 relevant? That's the year that Lyndon Johnson, the Democrat, launched what he called the War on Poverty. And since then, we spent about $23 trillion fighting the alleged war on poverty. And what's happened is we have incentivized women to marry the government and incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And the stats are clear. If you're raised without a father in the home, you're 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. It is the #1 social problem in America, and nobody but nobody's talking about it. The left doesn't talk about it because they cause the problem. Our side doesn't talk about it for fear that if you're white and you do it, you'll be accused of engaging in systemic racism. And if you're Black, as I am, you'll be accused, as I was by the LA Times, of being the Black face of white supremacy. Consider this too. A young Black man, aged 10 to 43, according to the Centers for Disease Control, is 13 times more likely to be murdered than a white male in the same demo. Blacks account for 60% of the shootings, the homicides, and the robberies in America. The #1 cause of preventable death for a white male 19 years and younger is accidents, like car accidents, or drownings, or overdoses. The #1 cause of preventable death for a 19 and under Black male, homicide, almost always at the hands of another young Black male. Now, unless you're prepared to say that Black people are just genetically inclined to commit more crime, you have to ask yourself, if it isn't the epidemic of fatherlessness, please tell me what it is. And whenever I mention this to my liberal friends, including Charlemagne the God, on whose show I was a couple months ago, they have no answer. And no one's talking about this. And again, this is compromising the future of a whole generation of Americans, and we're not talking about it. The other big issue, as I mentioned earlier, is school choice. I've already gone over the stats about that. There are think tanks on the left and on the right. Brookings Institution is on the left, and they have outlined what they call the success sequence. And #1, finish high school, presumably one where you can read, write at computer grade level. #2, don't have a kid until you get married. #3, get a job. And #4, avoid the criminal justice system. That's the formula that we ought to be pushing, and we're not pushing. The other big issue that I wanted to bring to the forefront, we talk a lot about spending. Republicans have a reputation of being fiscally more responsible than Democrats. And that's true, but that's a low bar. Whether it's Ronald Reagan or whether it's Donald Trump, government gets bigger and bigger and bigger, in part because the so-called entitlements, Social Security and Medicare, they're on automatic pilot. Even Bill Clinton and Barack Obama once referred to those entitlement programs as unsustainable, but nothing gets done. The reason nothing gets done is if you run promising to reform Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, you are going to lose the election. Donald Trump knew that. In 2016, you didn't hear him talking about entitlement reform, although he knows what I know. He also knows that it's political suicide to do that. The only way you're going to get politicians to do the kind of root canal surgery necessary to reform those programs and really cut spending is with an amendment to the Constitution to fix spending to a certain percentage of the GDP. That's the only way you're going to do it. That way, politicians have to go into a room, they come out and tell the voters, I'm sorry, the law made me do it. I didn't want to make these cuts, the law made me do it. Government in 1900 at all 3 levels, federal, state, local, took 9% of the American people combined. Now government at all those levels takes around 32%. And if you put a value on mandates, government at all levels takes almost half of what we produce, which is why our growth is so anemic over the last several years. We get 2 and 3% and we high five each other. We should be growing at 4, 5, 6% per year. People's income should be doubling and their net worth should be doubling every 12 to 15 years. And we're not, because of the inefficient way government spends money. Milton Friedman, one of my mentors, the Nobel laureate economist, said there are 4 ways of spending money, from the most efficient to the least efficient. The most efficient is your own money on yourself. Next is your own money on somebody you care about, as when you're spending money on a spouse, on a daughter. The other is when somebody's spending money on you, but it's a expense account. It's when you're working for somebody and you have an expense account, you can't go crazy, otherwise you're going to be fired. The least productive, least efficient way of spending money is somebody else's money on somebody else. And much of our budget is somebody else's money being spent on somebody else, which is why we're spending so much money so inefficiently.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I like Milton Friedman a lot. He had just wisdom on the value of an economy like the United States versus communism that has no carrot dangling to keep people moving forward. So you're there in California. You ran against Gavin Newsom. I was a cheerleader here from Utah. Do you think that they are going to try to sneak Gavin Newsom onto the ballot and remove? No. Okay. Tell me why you think that.
Well, nothing would please Gavin Newsom more than for that to happen. But you have to ask yourself this: why do you suppose Gavin Newsom has not declared for president? And the answer is real simple. Her name is Kamala Harris. When James Clyburn endorsed Joe Biden in 2020, it came right after Bernie Sanders won the Nevada caucuses. And for one brief shining moment, a self-described Democrat socialist was the party's frontrunner. They were scared to death. Joe Biden was going nowhere until Clyburn endorsed him on the eve of the South Carolina primary. Clyburn is from South Carolina, very well respected. So Biden wins that primary, and Clyburn extracts a promise from him. What's the promise? That your first Supreme Court nominee would be a Black female. Biden ran with a Black female. Out here in California, when it was pretty clear that Dianne Feinstein was not going to be able to finish out her term, Gavin Newsom publicly said, "I will appoint a Black female." And he did. Now, I know that Kamala Harris has poor poll numbers. I know that our side laughs at her cackle and considers her to be pretty vacuous. She had the assignment of being the border czar to get to the root causes of immigration and all that. However, among Blacks, she's at a 70% approval rating. And the poll I saw was not broken down by gender, but I assure you, Black females like her even more. Why is that relevant? The first primary for Democrats is South Carolina, and 60% of the Democrat voters in that primary state are Black. Most of those are Black females, and they love Kamala Harris. And they believe that her ridicule over her cackle is both sexist and racist. And they believe that Joe Biden has given her a thankless task to get to the root causes of illegal immigration, when in fact the root cause of the illegal immigration is Joe Biden. So they believe that she's been treated unfairly. And if she is drop kicked in favor of some white dude like Gavin Newsom or Mayor Pete, Black female voters won't be so angry they'll vote Republican, don't get me wrong. They just won't vote, thereby guaranteeing whoever it is we nominate will win. That is why Gavin Newsom has not announced presidency. He is hoping that something will happen to both of them. I don't mean that in a negative way, but if something were to happen to Joe Biden's health and somehow, some way, Kamala Harris said, "You know what, I'm so incompetent, I'm going to step aside," he would happily step in there. But she's not going to do that. She wants to be president. Remember, she ran for president. And if you look at her record, she ran for DA in San Francisco, she won. She ran for Attorney General in California, she won. She ran for US Senate in California, she won. She was on the ticket with Joe Biden, and she won. She's never lost an election. Now, I know she ran for president and pulled out, but that was before the very first primary, so I don't count that. She's never lost an election. She doesn't think she's incompetent. She thinks she's very competent. She is going nowhere. They are stuck with her. If Joe Biden cannot fog up a mirror, it'll be Kamala Harris. And Gavin Newsom knows it, which is why he's not made an announcement.
Oh, woof. Okay. Good analysis.
Yep.
Is there any chance though that Kamala Harris might run and make Gavin Newsom her running mate?
Uh, well, you can do that. According to the Constitution, if you have two people from the same state, those electoral votes cannot count.
Oh, okay.
That's what happened when George W. Bush put Dick Cheney on. They were both residents of Texas, and Cheney had to register as a resident of Wyoming in order to make that happen, so you wouldn't lose the electoral votes from Texas. So it can be done. But think about it. What's the upside? Two left-wing Californians in a 50-50 state. And as I point out in my book, As Goes California, Gavin Newsom makes Bernie Sanders look like a centrist. This is a guy, Gavin Newsom, that set up a panel for reparations. This is a guy, Gavin Newsom, that is banning gasoline-powered cars by 2035. He's more of a climate change extremist than even Joe Biden is. This is a guy who's pushed all these soft on crime policies like cashless bail. He's the one who appointed George Gascon as DA of San Francisco. This is a guy that has not charged people to the fullest extent of the law because he believes that criminals are really victims of our society. Gavin Newsom is the guy that signed the legislation, I'm not making this up, requiring every publicly held corporation in California to have at least one member of the LGBTQIA plus community on its board of directors, a clear violation of the 14th Amendment. He's a gun control extremist. He signed a bill that requires large toy stores to have a gender neutral toy aisle so that if your gender neutral kid wants to buy a gender neutral toy, there's a safe space for him or her to go to. I go on and on and on about the loony things this man has done. So once America realizes who he is, he'll be a liability because Kamala Harris had the most left-wing record in the Senate, even more left-wing than Bernie Sanders when she ran for president. So it doesn't seem to me to make any political sense to have two left-wing Californians on the same ticket. So I don't believe that if Joe Biden can't make it, Kamala Harris will choose him as her running mate. I doubt it.
Okay, so first things first, everybody needs to go get your book, As Goes California, so that they know this stuff.
Right.
And then number two, if he does run, we need you back on the show, letting people know just how dangerous this would be for the rest of the United States. I can't, like, there's things I love about California. My dad's from California. I have family in California. But when it comes to their policies, I'm like, yikes, this is very scary. And we have a lot of people moving to Utah from California, and they come here and they go, wow, we love your values. We love how much you value the family, guns, e-commerce, and then they continue to vote from the very thing that they ran away from. And people in Utah are pretty nervous about that. Go ahead.
And you should be. Right now, Gavin Newsom has never been more unpopular. His approval rating is the lowest it's ever been, in part because people in California perceive him to be ignoring California while he's going to China and going to Israel. People are concerned about crime. They're concerned about homelessness. California has around 12% of the nation's population, but about 30% of the homeless population. And Gavin Newsom served 2 terms as governor of San Francisco and promised to end the homeless crisis in San Francisco by the end of his 2nd term. It's worse than ever. He was lieutenant governor for 2 terms for 8 years and sat around pouting he didn't have enough to do. And I said over and over again, why don't you go back to your home city and fix the homeless problem that you promised to do years ago? And so for those reasons, he's never been less popular. California is a beautiful state. You cannot beat the weather. It's got great schools. You can go skiing and you can go surfing within the same day. It's a wonderful state. Lousy politicians, lousy politics. We have a supermajority of Democrats in the Assembly, a supermajority of Democrats in the Senate, and we've not elected a Republican statewide in over 20 years. Not governor, not lieutenant governor, not AG, not controller, not treasurer, nothing in the last 20 years or so. And this is what we're having. Over 700,000 people have now left California in the last 2 or 3 years. The first time there's ever been an out migration like that in the state's 170-year history. And you're quite right. People will leave and they go to places like Utah, Florida, Texas, and then they vote blue because they haven't connected the dots. The primary reason that people leave California particularly young people, is because they cannot afford the price of a home. The average price of a home in California is 175% above the national average. Why? Because of the relationship between the Democrats and the environmentalists that do not want any kind of construction. We are under about 3 million units. In terms of units per capita, we are dead. We're number 49. And that's because anything that you try to do, somebody will file a lawsuit and stop it. Unions will do it to extract promises from the developers to use union labor, which jacks up the price of a home. Environmentalists do it because they don't want anything done. And then you have, of course, the normal NIMBY people. So for all those reasons, we are way underdeveloped in terms of housing, which is why people leave. So then they go to Utah and they haven't connected the dots between the policies that liberals have been pushing in Sacramento and the price of a home. So they don't realize why they left. And then they continue to vote the same way as they did when they left. It's just maddening almost.
Wow. 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 Well, Larry, I appreciate you so much coming on. This is the exact wisdom that I started the show saying that you share. And I hope everybody enjoyed this and got something out of it. I'm going to put a link to your book, As Goes California. Where else can people follow you?
They can go to Larry Elder on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram. I'm also on Threads. And I'm on Truth Social. And then go to my website, also larryelder.com, where I outline some of the programs you and I were talking about, particularly the amendment to the Constitution. And I also have legislation that states can adopt to get rid of these soft on crime George Soros-backed DAs. It's called Enforce the Law Act. We got to get rid of them. A lot of people are dead now who otherwise wouldn't be dead if it weren't for these George Soros soft on crime DAs.
Great. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.